Hey everybody, welcome back to Power to Paint. I'm Derek Wicks. Hope everybody's doing well, everybody's healthy and safe and staying clear of COVID. And today we're going to do part 6 of Szechuan Cafe. Just screwing with you. We're all done with that. That virtual workshop is completely done, and I am not ashamed to say I am glad to be moving on to something else. So I thought for a little change up today, we would do a studio technique, and this is a little Photoshop technique that I use to add a glow to something. And this is a picture of a river right down from my house, and I love the lines in this and I love the texture changes, but I don't like the lighting. It's a little lackluster, doesn't have a lot of punch. So today we're going to learn how to take this and turn it into this. And it's a very simple process in Photoshop or Photoshop Elements, whichever one you have. You can do it in both. I'm using Photoshop, so I'll show you there. It's a process that only takes about 10 minutes in total time to apply, and I use it so much it's not funny. So let's get into the studio. I'll crank up Photoshop, and I'll show you how to do it. Alright, so today's lesson is I'm going to show you how to take a half-decent photo. This is a river down by my house that I liked, but it really kind of lacks any kind of dramatic lighting. So I'm going to add dramatic lighting. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to teach you today how to use Photoshop to very simply take this lackluster photo, for lack of a better word, and change it into this with nice dramatic lighting. And this is a painting I'll definitely be getting to in about a month or so. There's a couple of things on my palette right now. But anyways, I'll show you how to take this photo and make it into this photo. All right, so the first thing we want to do is, there's a lot of dark in our shadow. So I had this underexposed when I photographed it. So the first thing I want to do is get a little bit of detail into these darks. So there's a very simple way in Photoshop that we can do that. And if you go up to Image, Adjustments, and into Shadows and Highlights, it's a very good little filter that helps you get detail, lighten up your darks, so your shadows, so you can get some see that detail that's in your photograph. Now this automatically defaults to 35%. I think that's too much, so I'm going to go down to around 15%. I think, if memory serves. Yeah. Now, to see by reducing that down to just 15% shadows, how it's giving me some detail in my darks, but still left it dark with a nice contrast between darks and lights. Now, if you would like to see the difference you make before applying it, down here in Preview, you can just, right now it's clicked on, so it's showing you the changes you've made. If you turn it off, that's the original, and that's the new. That's the original, and that's new. Now, I'm very happy with that, so I will click OK. And that's the first step. Now we have a little bit of detail in our shadowed areas, and now we can apply the glow, which is very, very, very simple. Now, before we actually start creating our glow, the one thing I want to make sure of is go up to Photoshop, Preferences, and Cursors. And under the painting cursors, I want you to make sure that full-size brush tip is selected. Most people have precise on, and Photoshop comes default on precise. And if you have it on precise, now let's go over and grab our brush tool, which is the tool we're going to use the most. You see how it's just crosshairs? So it doesn't give you a whole lot of information on where you're applying it, how big you're applying it, how thick you're applying it. But if you go up to Photoshop, Preferences, Cursors, and you select full size brush tip, now it tells you how big your brush is, you know where you're going to apply it. It's a lot better for applying a misty background. Okay, so let's just make sure that that's selected, and then we're ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do is, we do not want to destroy this beautiful background picture, the initial picture we got. If I just start working right now by putting a brush stroke on top, it's actually right on the picture. So I've changed the actual physical picture, and I don't want to do that. So we can just get rid of that. And by the way, I just used Command Z to undo my last action. And what we can do is in Layers, and if you don't have your layers, just go up to Window and click beside Layers. See how I unclicked it? Layers disappears. Go to Windows, Layers, and there's Layers. Top right hand corner, click, new layer, and we'll call this the Mist Glow. All right, so now we have two layers. We have the main background. If we turn that off, is our picture. And we have Mist Glow, but there's nothing on that. Now, how it's a lighter gray, that's the active layer, which means that's the layer you're working on at that time. So let's just make sure that the Mist Glow is the active layer. All right. So now we're going to go over to our brushes. Just make sure you have brush, click and hold, brush tool. And we get all kinds of selections up here. So let's just reset everything. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure we're on soft round. Why? Well, if we're on hard round, it makes a very hard line, which is not what we want to do at all. Okay. So we can just get rid of that. And the first thing we'll select is make sure it's on soft round. And now let's give you an example. Now do you see how that's a little diffused? It's still pretty opaque, but it's got a nice diffused edge. Okay, so that's step one. That's a lot more conducive to the effect we're trying to get, right? So the second thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to the opacity. And I'm going to put it down to, I'm going to show you first, 20 is going to be too low, but when I put the opacity down to 20, do you see how it's nice and thin? It's not applying a lot. You're controlling how see-through the stroke you're making is. So if we go up to 50%, which is usually where I start, so it's a little thicker, and then we apply it. Do you see how it's a little darker, to not as see-through? It's a little more opaque. All right, so we can just use our Command Z to get rid of what we've done. What you can do is go over here and click Colors. And then you can just use, see the little slider here? You can slide whatever, slide down into your yellows and choose a yellow. And then over here you can see that the color you selected. Watch this little box right here when I change colors. Okay, comes whatever the active, whatever color you're selecting becomes that active color. So I'm going to go down a little bit more, and that looks pretty close, right? So let's use the color that I selected. Now, I also want to start with a little bit of a big brush. So I'm going to go up to in around 400, anywhere in around 400. I'm going to double check that I'm on Mist Glow layer. And now I'm just going to start clicking my mouse, holding, dragging, and applying a little bit of a mist. Okay. Now, as I do a really large area, I'm thinking, it's too heavy. I don't like that, so I can get rid of it. I just Control Z, and I'm going to down. I'm going to down it to about 30%. And that's a lot better. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a whole mist through the back here. The whole thing. The whole thing is going to get a instant downtoning. Now if I go over to this layer and I turn it off, there you go. You have an independent layer. Now I want to get into this tree a little bit, but if I use this brush, it's way too much. So we can undo that, and we're going to decrease the size of our brush so it becomes smaller. Now I have a lot more control over my misting, but because the brush is smaller, it makes it more of a hard edge. So I got to reduce. I got to Control Z and get rid of that. I've got to reduce the layer even more. Okay, so I go down to somewhere in around 10% or so. And you see how that just creates the misty background then. Okay, so I'm clicking, I'm holding, and I'm dragging, and I'm applying a mist. Okay, now this tree along here is in the foreground, so I don't want to go over that. That's why I'm going in between the trees. Just applying a little mist, and again, it's on its own layer. So there you go. All right. I'm also now want to work into the trees a little bit. So I'm going to stay with a smaller brush. I'm going to apply a little bit here. And I'm going to start applying a little bit of the mist over the trees. Just the edges, because they're in the foreground, but they really kind of mist back in. Okay. And this area is actually very see-through, so I'm going to apply a lot of mist on this one. And I can up my mist a little bit. You see how I play with how opaque it is, depending on the area, to expedite what I'm doing. Okay, so there's our first layer. Now we can get really fancy and we can go over here and we can say new layer and mist 2. Let's call it, you can call it whatever you want. Click OK and it makes a brand new layer now that's mist 2. Make sure it's the active one. By default it would always be the active one. And now we can actually lighten our color up a little bit. So you've got 2 ways you can do this. As you just saw, if I click on the color, it brings up the color picker and I can actually reduce it. See, this is the current color we have. This is the new color we're selecting. This comes in handy because you can see how lighter you're getting. So I want to make sure that I'm not too light, and that's pretty good. So I'll say OK. And now we're going to put 30% on, and we're going to up the size of our brush a little bit and go around 150. And we're going to start applying a second layer. Now this layer, we're going to not bring it all the way down and around. And I'm being very kind of jagged with it. I'm stopping and starting. And, okay. And now as we get down to about here, I'm going to reduce the flow. And I'm going to put it down to 50%. And you see how it softens that edge even more? I'm going to put the flow right down. And what the flow does is, if you think of it as an airbrush, it's just controlling how much is coming out. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger because I want to soften this off. And we're starting to get a nice mist. Now the nice thing about what we've done here is there's 2 layers of mist. Okay, there's our first layer, and then there's our whiter layer. All right. Now why I did it on 2 layers is to show you that, say this mist, let's darken it up even more. Let's put a lot on there. So we got way too much white mist. Instead of redoing the layer, I can actually go to this layer, and in the layer selections, it's got an opacity too, and I can reduce it, and look what happens. You can reduce it, so everything on that layer gets reduced. Cool, huh? So they got complete control of what you want to do. So I can actually go back to my brush and make it a little bit smaller. And I'm going to put a little bit of mist in here, although I'm going to up my flow. And this will take some playing. It's just a lot of playing with settings to see how they do, but this is the basis of how to get a nice glow. Now to work everything in, I'm going to go and make another new layer and call it Mist 3. And why I'm making these layers is because if I don't like them, I can just get rid of the layer and leave what I have already done that I liked untouched, right? Now I'm going to get a huge brush and I'm going to make it nice and big. But I'm going to make the opacity really low, like 10%, and the flow really low, like maybe 20. Yeah, let's go to around 20. Look at how big that brush is. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply overall mist that blends everything in. Do you see how it's just blending that tree in? Now I can reduce this by a little bit. I still want to be around 500. Nope, see how it does a big jump around 500? That's good. And I'm going to up the flow just a little bit. Did you see how it's just creating a glow over that? And if I turn that layer off, do you see what we did? We just created a little misting over that tree, right? Just a little. See how layers help you out? So let's get one more layer here. So we'll right click, new layer, and we'll call it white glue. Oh, if I spelt it right. These big 8 fingers of mine. Okay, so we'll make sure we're on white glow. It will be by default. And we're going to reduce the flow down to about, I'd say about 15. But what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and we're going to get almost a pure white. Okay? And we're going to apply it just on the top here. Not enough flow. Oh, because our flow is down. I forgot to up our flow. Let's go up to about 60% on the flow. And we'll go up to about 20% on the... There we go. That's a little bit better. So now we just start working and click, hold, drag. And in this top corner, we just start putting in some of the white. And you see how that really makes a glow to the top, and it's on its own layer. So now we're ready to do our final trick, and that's add the shafts of light. And this is only if you like to do it. I do it sometimes, but I don't do it a lot. But I'll show you how to do it anyways. So let's start with, so go up to Image and Duplicate. And it'll automatically say Copy. Say OK. So now up here in your Finder, you have the original one, and you have a copy. So we're going to get a little fancy here. I want you to click and then hold down your Shift and click the bottom one, and you just selected all of these layers. See, they're all active. And now right click on the top right corner again and go down to Merge Layers. And what that does is that just makes all of your glow one layer. And why I duplicate it is because if I don't like what I'm going to do here, I still have my original file untouched with all my layers. Okay? So now we're ready to make those shafts of light. And it's very easy to do this. So we just make sure we're still on our white glow and that we're on our copy. I know, broken record. And what we're going to do is go up to the lasso tool, but then go down to the polygonal lasso tool. Okay? And what's nice about this one is it can create an area by just doing a few clicks. So click once and then move your mouse. And you can see what it does is it makes a line that'll go wherever you want it to until you click again. So I'll go up to the top here, click. Move over to the left a little bit, click. Come down the painting, click. And then when we get to the end, when we get to the original point, you see how it changes from crosshairs to the polygonal icon? That's how you close it. Okay, so now you have an active area, and you see how it's moving? That tells you it's an active area on the white glow area, on the white glow layer, I'm sorry. So now we're going to go over and grab a new tool, and this one is called the Eraser tool. And the Eraser tool, it does exactly what you think it says. It erases stuff. Now, by default, it'll come in at 100% opacity, and if I do that, you can see it's way too much. It just makes a shaft of light that's just, it's ridiculous. It becomes graphic. So let's just go back to our Z, and we're going to bring the opacity down to about 20%. I find that 20 is pretty good when I'm trying to do this. And what we're going to do is we're just going to run right over the area, and you see how it starts to erase a little bit of it? Okay, so you just run right over the area and then deselect, and you created a nice soft shaft of light. And now we can make a second one. We can get the polygonal tool, click, 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 and then grab our eraser tool and do the same thing. And then select, deselect, and let's do one more big one. So we'll go up to our polygonal tool, click, 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 close it, grab our eraser tool, and erase. Okay, select, deselect. Now if you want to get really, really fancy, we can make one more shaft, and we're going to put it in between this one, but we're going to make it a lot thinner than the other ones. And this time we're going to grab the eraser. We're going to make the opacity down to like 10-12% so it doesn't erase as much. Select, deselect, and there you go. There's shafts of light. So there you go. There's how you put a nice glow into your photograph. So if we turn this layer off, there was our original photograph, and there's how we enhanced it. Okay, and we're pretty close to what I got. Our colors are a little bit different, but you can see that how this adds a real sense of drama and lighting to the original photo, which had nice lines. I really liked the lines that took us through the photo, but I really thought the lighting was a little boring, and that's why I added the dramatic lighting. So there you go. There's how to add a glow using Photoshop. Hope you learned lots. And until next time, everybody, happy painting.